Hello and welcome to this Q&A event hosted by the Somerville Ward 5 Democratic Committee. This meeting is being recorded for later publication by the Ward 5 and Somerville Democrats. With just over a month left before Election Day on November 7th, the committee is pleased to welcome Ward 5 City Councilor candidate Jack Perenick to take questions directly from committee members about your experience, values, and agenda for Somerville. To start, I'll give you 5 minutes for opening remarks, and after that, we'll open the floor for folks to get on stack and ask questions of each candidate. But for now, take it away, Jack. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Nate. Thank you for organizing. It's kind of too bad that we don't have more civic associations in Somerville to get the candidates together, talk about things like this. And it's been nice getting to know more members of the community. And it's good to be back home with all of you. For members of the audience who are watching this clip, I've been a member of the Ward 5 committee for the last 2 years. And it's really been a great place to meet all of you wonderful people. And it was definitely a nice experience being able to come here, know all of you, having spoken with all of you at some point, at some time on something in the city that mattered to all of you. And I really appreciate the chance to be here again and to speak to not just all of you who I know, but also the folks who might watch this clip, hopefully not the day before Election Day, as they are desperately on the way into the polling booth. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jack Perenick. I'm a Magoon Square resident, and I live here in the city with my grandmother and my partner, Leslie. And I love Somerville. Somerville has been an extraordinary place. It is somewhat an adopted home for me. I grew up just across the border in Porter Square on the Cambridge side, and I am now, thanks to our elections division, it has been confirmed to us exactly where Porter Square is in Somerville, and I can confirm it's a decent part of Ward 5, and so I'm glad to see that. But most of my involvement here in the city has been as a youth organizer, getting people involved, not just with our committee here to run as delegates and to take part in Democratic Party activities, but also in my role as president of the Young Democrats of Massachusetts, and just generally meeting people and making sure that they get involved in city service. Now, obviously, attempting to make the jump into elective office here, there's a little bit of different responsibilities and an entirely different policy portfolio of things to look forward to, and things I want to engage on as hopefully your next elected official. And I have to say, it's all still a little bit surreal. My name is printed on a sign over there, which is just a really great kind of experience. And I have to say, being a young person in the city, running for office has really been a heartwarming experience, and I'm thankful to all of you that have helped make it that way. But I'm really excited in this city. I think that we have a lot of potential on what Somerville can be for the next couple of years. As has been alluded to, we have a number of really great master plans and a lot of really dedicated, hardworking people in the city helping to make us the way that we are. For me, what's most important is our housing affordability. Really, my guiding priority as a councilor would be making sure that the people that are here can afford to stay here, that they can afford to raise families here, like I hope to do in the next couple of years, that they can afford to age in place and stay here all the way, and that they can continue to have their families live in Somerville and really be multi-generational residents if that's what they choose. But also for people that don't live here now and who want to, I want to make sure that that's still a possibility. For generations, that has been something that's been possible. People have been able to move here, be part of this community, and it hasn't been something that's broken the bank. I'm really dedicated to making sure that we make sure that Somerville is a place that stays that way. And so for me, really essential to that, doing a major rezoning. We had some hard work done in 2019, 2020 to upzone our city, to make sure that we're able to handle the growth, to have places for people that want to live in this city. I'm really dedicated to making sure that we go through in Magoon and Ball Square specifically and do the work to make sure that housing will stay affordable here. I'm really proud to have earned the endorsement of Yes in My Backyard, Somerville. That's an organization that advocates for many of the things that I think we all here agree on this call, but we might not use that term to describe ourselves. That's the idea that we want affordable housing in our communities. We want this to be a place where people can afford to live, and we don't care about, kind of the somewhat more suburban, somewhat more kind of touchy issues of, everyone has to have a lawn, or we should only have single family houses. It's about an inclusionary community and making sure that we do that. Also making sure that we have efficient and accessible public transportation in our city has remained incredibly important. That starts at our sidewalks that in this part of the city especially are in awful condition. They're not ADA accessible. Even walking down the street today, there was a power chair user in a bike lane on Central Street. In the ward. It really is not a safe place for people to be able to get around. And I'm really dedicated to making sure that we change that, not just through upgrades in our public infrastructure there, but also bike safety throughout the city, making sure that we're sharing our public ways appropriately, and making sure that when we have transportation gaps in the city, like we have north and south between the red line and the green line, that we fill those gaps. I'm really excited in the idea of micro transportation. That is the idea of having smaller shuttle buses in the city connect our north to south routes, something similar to what the Salem Skipper has done up on the North Shore. And I see Councilor Perenick coming on video, so excited. And I know that he's sponsoring something really similar, but I'm really, really excited at the idea of getting something like that into our community to fill that transit gap. And I'm excited about building community and supporting our neighbors. Too many families in the last year have been pushed out of this city, not just because of prices, but also because of the poor condition of our school system. As your next Ward 5 councilor, I absolutely commit to making sure that the Brown School and the Winter Hill School get rebuilt, that we keep both of those school districts for the families that love and support them. We just had a meet and greet with Principal McGuire, his weekly muffins with McGuire, and I can tell you the parents at the Brown School love that school, but it isn't safe for their kids right now. We need to make sure that we're doing the public investment, that we're following up with parents on how that $13 million feasibility study is coming, because it is so important that parents feel like they're getting the dedication from the city staff that we know that they deserve. And I'm also really excited, as a young person in the city, to have time to dedicate to this job, to support all the things that we love, making sure that our arts community is able to stay here in the ward. The Armory in particular is a place I want to make sure that we're supporting, that we're cleaning up some of the work that's been done in the city to make sure we reserve that.
Sorry, Jack, that's time on the 5 minutes, but hopefully you'll get a chance to say a little more in response to some questions. So I'm just going to move on now to the portion of the meeting where members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask questions of Jack. We're going to try to keep this event friendly and informal, but for the sake of getting to as many questions as possible, each question will be limited to 30 seconds in length, and each response from the candidates will be limited to 90 seconds in length. I'll time you and I'll let you know when your time has expired. Please try to respect the time limit so that we can get as many questions as possible. Questions asked tonight have not been pre-screened by myself or the other committee officers. I don't expect that this will be a problem, but I ask that folks please keep their questions respectful and focused on the candidate's experience, values, and policy agenda for Somerville. I also ask that you listen to the other questions and try not to ask redundant questions. With regard to the questioner order, we'll start by giving members of the committee a chance to get on stack to ask a question. And if committee members have a question to ask, please type stack in the chat and I'll call on you in the order in which you got in the queue. And if and when all committee members who wanted to ask a question have been able to do so, we'll move on to other Ward 5 residents, and then after that to other Somerville residents. So with that, members of the committee may now get on stack to ask a question. And I see we've got one from Joe. Take it away, Joe. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Nate. Jack, thanks for being here. Jack, many people have asked me about your experience. They've asked me about your age. They say you're too young to be on the city council. I just have a question for you. Do you think you're too young to be on Somerville City Council?
No, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. And I won't make a joke that I could about your experience in the city. I think you just mentioned this would be your 5th Somerville City Councilor. I must admit, I was not here for Macaluso's first election, but I've learned about it. I've taken the effort to go back and look at all of our former councilors, obviously one of whom we're joined by here tonight. But no, I mean, I think, I'm a younger person. I would be, a standard deviation younger than a lot of the people serving on the council now. But I think that's a valuable experience to bring in right now. I think a lot of the issues that we talk about so much, and that I think many people, in this group care about altruistically, but it doesn't necessarily hit personally. I mean, the housing affordability as a renter in the city, that matters to me. Making sure that we keep that under control determines if I can continue to live in the city. I mean, the quality of our public school system is something that in a couple of years is going to be really important for me, raising kids in the city, being able to ensure that, we as a community are inclusive and that I'm able to live out my natural life here is something that, if I'm not doing my job well as a city councilor, I won't be able to live in the city for very long. And that is, something that I'm really dedicated to looking towards the future. And I have a lot of future, hopefully, with hopes for good health. I have a lot of future in this city, and I'm hoping to make sure that for the duration of that time that I'm alive and thereafter, it remains the wonderful place that it is.
Thanks so much, Jack. All right, so next up on stack is Warren.
Hi, Jack. I have a question. I was heartened to see that you mentioned affordable housing as a principle idea. And there are several, I mean, you mentioned a few different approaches, and not all of them are you know, some of them might be in conflict with each other. So for example, or maybe they're not, but for example, you know, some people say that the housing problem is really more of a supply and demand issue, and so you got to just build more housing. Other people say you got to control the rents in the housing, and with stern, you know, rules around rent control. And then you had this idea about density. So what would be your priorities, and where do you stand on a rent control ordinance in the city of Somerville?
Thank you, Warren. I will try and do justice to this in 90 seconds. I'll go a little fast for that reason. One, we can't build our way out of this alone. That's absolutely clear. So the role of the councilor in Somerville is twofold. We need to build more housing in the city. We need more deed restricted housing. We need to increase municipal vouchers. We need to make sure that we have a well-funded community land trust in the city. We need to make sure that we're properly funding the 100 Homes project. But we also need to make sure that other municipalities are carrying their fair share. Things like the MBTA Communities Act that's requiring density around commuter rail stations and MBTA stations is helping us in that goal. We need to build 200,000 more houses in this state. So not only am I committed to making sure that Somerville does its part in that, and that we have strong tenant protections in this city, and that we begin deflating the costs of rents and home ownership here in this city, but also that we do so for the Commonwealth, because that's going to help us here. There's a lot of people that want to live in the city, especially if we do our job. We get rents down, we make affordable home ownership a reality in Somerville. We're going to have even more people that want to live here. We need to make sure that the Commonwealth as a whole is building the housing that we need, and we need to make sure that we build in the tenant protections there. I'm not a supporter of doing that by putting in a regulation. We need to bring down prices in the city across the board. The only way we do that is by increasing the supply of the housing, by having stronger tenant protections, by making sure that we have the subsidies for people who are truly in need, and making sure that we have the types of housing that we need. You know, in our studios, in places that are car-free, in our city squares, we need more studio apartments. We need more housing for families. We need more affordable home ownership opportunities for people in the city. We have to be promoting all of these ways to make sure that living in Somerville is affordable. And we need to, again, engage in that state coalition building, not just with people like our state delegation, Senator Jalen, who's here with us today, but also with senators and representatives from across the Commonwealth to make sure.
Time. Sorry, Jack.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to move on next to Olivia for a question. If any other committee members want to get on stack, you're welcome to do so. But Olivia, take it away. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Nate. And thank you, Jack. Another global warming question. I feel like sometimes I don't want to mention recycling because it seems like a low level issue. But I do notice so much of our trash we pretend is recycled. What do you see as our town? Can we stand up and say, hey, we're going to make it harder for people? Or I guess, I don't know. What's your take on, is this a conversation you would want to have with the city?
Yeah, absolutely. And the sad, really tragic reality is there's still low-hanging fruit on the climate issue. Things like recycling are still completely valid pathways for us to be taking. I have an associate in sustainable business practices on environmental studies. One of the things that I would be most important in working with our Magoon and Ball Square businesses to make sure that they are actually recycling all the products. You're completely right. It's tragically not something that happens. A lot of those items do go to landfills. Even with the city, we've had a problem with bulk trash collection and hazardous object collection, which we didn't do throughout the course of the pandemic, really got built up. Even leaf collection in the city, which obviously can be a climate issue, especially if it gets into the dangerous area of fires. We really want to make sure that we're doing our jobs in supporting DPW and making sure. I've been a mayoral appointee on advisory committees that have had to work with DPW. The funding there is limited. We need additional resources to make all of those recycling and land use priorities happen. And frankly, that just takes a larger investment. I'm really proud of the work our mayor has done to get us AAA bond rated as a city. That opens up additional money in our budget next year that we won't be paying for in debt servicing. I am really, really hoping and strongly push for an investment in our DPW because frankly, we're underfunded. It's hurting our roads, sidewalks, and our trash collection. Even those new big bellies, which are great. I've used my participatory budgeting vote to vote for increased adoption of those because it's helping solve the rat problem and it's helping solve our global warming problem in two. So I'm hoping that we can get those projects a little bit further with some additional money.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. So next up on stack is Alex Feldman. Alex, you have 30 seconds.
Hi, Jack. Thank you for being here. I've been impressed that you've graduated from Tufts, or you're planning on graduating like in less than 4 years, and that you also sound like a very polished candidate, a lot more poised than most people who are, I think you're 20 or something. I remember that you, in a short period of time, you've run for chair of the Ward 5 Dems, then you ran for chair of the Somerville Dems, and I'm wondering, what would be your favorite office to have? Like, and don't hold back, dream big. What would be your, like, looking 10 years from now, what office do you want to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think today, we're Democrats here. Hopefully the people watching this video will be too for what I'm about to say. But looking at the nation where we are today, the Speaker of the House was just ousted on a vote, and our federal government is in chaos. I think more than ever, we need strong municipal leaders. We need people who are closest to the people to be good leaders. I think municipal government is absolutely the way to do that. I think state government is another place where really we should be investing more of our time and focus. And I think, frankly, well, the federal government, especially the executive branch, really does a great way. I was in DC at the White House just yesterday commemorating Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. There's still a lot the federal government can do, and there's a lot that they do. Unfortunately, we have seen a lack of action from the federal government in so many categories. And while there's important investments still coming, and we have to take advantage of those, the reality, divided government, which is likely to occur again, we need to focus at the state and local level, ensuring that we push our priorities into budgets, into policies, and making sure that we do that at the place where people can have the greatest access. And, frankly, as a younger candidate and a not, as well-resourced candidate, I'm really glad that I got the chance to run for municipal office when I did, although obviously it will be a really hard loss from our current councilor, Bea Gomez, who I know, I will continue to do the work to make sure that everything that she did in government continues on, especially our bicycle network plan, the work she's done with Summer Viva and our immigrant community, and making sure that, as a community, we try and stay better involved with our neighbors. That's the kind of thing that only happens at the municipal government. So I would really love to stay involved in our city government here in Somerville.
Thanks so much, Jack. All right, so next up is Harris Grumman for a question. Harris, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Nate, and thank you, Jack. Well, Jack, I mean, outside of this ward committee, the only, work I've ever done with you or any familiarity I have with you is your very vocal opposition to what my essential worker union members needed for rent stabilization, and Senator Jalen and I were working on together, and you spoke very vociferously against that at the State House. I would like to know how long you've lived in this ward and what issue campaigns have you worked on in this ward to improve the ward or improve the city?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Harris. And so I'll say, first of all, I've been a registered elector of this ward since the time I was able to register for vote. So I've been a lawful resident since I turned 18. And I living here with family, and I appreciate the sense of community that gives me in the ward. In that time in the ward, I really wanted to make sure that building a sustainable Somerville is possible. I think that's something that only happens if we get serious about building additional housing for people like me that want to be able to live here. When I was moving back in with my grandmother in Somerville, she had to move from where she was living to a place that was accessible for someone who was wheelchair bound. We had extremely limited options for what that looked like in this city. And frankly, if we're not building the kind of housing that is accessible, that is affordable, we're not going to have a city where people can afford to live. And so making sure that we have that production of housing is really important to me, especially for disabled people, and making sure that we're building an inclusive community for wheelchair users and for people with all sorts of mobility impairments. On the issue advocacy side, I was a strong supporter of the Fair Share Amendment that came in, and I want to make sure that we continue to receive those dollars here in Somerville. I know as a Green Line rider, that is not necessarily something that we feel all the time here. And I'll say, having been talking with some Green Line users recently, unfortunately, we're not really feeling the results of that investment. I'm hoping that more of those fair share dollars come here. I'm also, though, really interested in making sure that, with the adoption of policies like that, I also was a supporter of question 4 and voted to endorse it here with you in this committee, at the city committee, and at the state committee level for the Democratic Party, and helped fund an operation to make sure that
is time. Sorry, Jack.
No.
But thanks for that answer. I'm going to move on next to Enid. Enid, you have 30 seconds for a question.
Okay, thanks, Nate. And hello, Jack. I would like to know, you're going to be taking over from Bea. I'm wondering whether, to what extent you expect to continue what she's been doing, and if and how you would change the direction of her activity in the position you're running for. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, I think Councilor Gomez-Moacad has done an extraordinary job in office, and there is no kind of big direction that I would say, like, I'm going to be different than her in that regard. I really think Bea has done an excellent job for our community. I've been involved with some of the work that she's done, and I think really the constituent service element is the most important part of this job. When people have questions about how something in the city works, when people aren't sure about what's going on, when they need that communication, when they need help, frankly, making sure that we're there for people. Even just on the campaign trail, I have had people reach out to me and say, I haven't heard from the city on X, Y, or Z for weeks and weeks and months. Can you please help me? And, you know, I've even found as a private citizen, you can go in to City Hall and ask, you know, directors of departments for help for constituents, and they're more than happy to oblige. But really, we need someone that connects the city government to people in our city. And unfortunately, that's a time-intensive role. It's something I think Councilor Gomez-Moacad did an excellent job of and continues to do an excellent job of, but really making sure that I work in partnership with other councilors and, of course, our school committee member, Laura Patone, is here tonight, making sure that we work with those people to get people answers in frequent communication was, I think, the most important thing that Beatrice did. And I think also, you know, holding frequent office hours, making sure that you're out there. Already just on the campaign trail, I've tried to reserve my Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday mornings from 8 a.m. To 11. This is a little bit of a plug. People can sign up to book an appointment with me and talk with me one-on-one if they need help with something in city services, they want to talk about an issue that's important to them. I really like meeting with people, making sure you make the individual time available.
Thanks so much, Jack. All right, so next up on stack is Laura Patone. Laura, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Jack. I'm kind of a one-trick pony. Same question. We have two school buildings, the Winter Hill Community Innovation School and the Brown School, that neither need to be renovated or replaced, as well as a school facility master plan to create the community plan for this work and long-term needs. How would you as a city councilor create office to accelerate this work and commit to a timeline considering all the competing priorities?
Laura, I think I got about 80% of that, so I think that I'm good. And I think I remember the question as well, so I'll go from, but I think just for the video, Councilor, school committee member Patone was asking about the school buildings and what we can do on that front. So this is one of the few things where it really is in the domain of the council, because we have to get the funding that's there. Working with the Mass School Buildings Association and making sure that the work that our mayor's doing, that this feasibility study returns a plan that gets the maximum state investment possible is a huge priority of mine. Also making sure that we have two buildings that are in consideration jointly with this feasibility study here. I am really committed to making sure that we retain the Brown School that is finally in a proper condition. You know, walking around touring the building last week, going into the kind of sub basement to look around, I saw a building that I don't think the city would allow to be open if it was a private establishment. We shouldn't tolerate that kind of, you know, dilapidated condition. We really need a public investment in our schools. We need state help with that. We really need a large 30% subsidy from the Mass School Buildings to make sure that we're able to fund that kind of investment, because frankly, we are in a school condition where the Brown School has been neglected for a very long time. I think parents really need a timeline on that. I know that we're expecting something very shortly from our project managers on that. And I know our project manager, she's very busy with this project as well as others, but you know, frankly, parents really need a timeline. They need to know. I know so many friends that are parents that have moved out of the city in recent years. That is, you know, really unfortunate. And I think that, frankly, that's going to continue to happen if we don't get straighter answers to parents about when they can expect an open building and what the, you know, optionality looks like if we do encounter additional unforeseen circumstances.
Thanks, Jack. So I put myself on stack here, and like Laura, I'm going to ask the same question I asked of Naima, which is, in the past, some candidates running for office in Somerville have pledged not to take campaign contributions from certain groups, for example, real estate developers or police unions. Are there any such groups of potential campaign contributors from whom you would refuse or return contributions?
Yeah, and I'm actually in the really lucky position that I've yet to have to accept a contribution from someone that I didn't know personally. I'm also in the situation where almost all my contributions are small dollars from young Democrats in the city, across the country, and from close kind of family and friends. No one that I think's put me in any sort of compromising position. If for whatever reason in my campaign for Ward 5 City Council, a fossil fuel developer reached out and said, we would like to give you money, I would reject that money. I don't think it's something that's entirely likely to happen, but I certainly would. Obviously, under Massachusetts law, donations from registered lobbyists are strictly limited. I haven't received any donations from any registered lobbyists. Also, obviously, corporations cannot make donations of any kind. So I obviously haven't accepted, solicited, sought out any, and couldn't and wouldn't accept any under state law. I have a lot of familiarity with the 2010 state ethics law. I've had to work within it a lot, being someone who was involved in a 501c4 and worked with groups in the state house. So I've been very, very careful about making sure that we are, that I am in my campaign 100% compliant with state ethics laws. These and everything else for my campaign has been financed by people who've supported me and people who care about city politics. But certainly anyone who would propose a kind of compromising position, any union, private association, or anything like that, that would put me in a compromising position, I certainly wouldn't accept any financial contribution from them, or any in-kind trip, service, Clarence Thomas-esque vacation. I would steer clear of.
Thanks so much, Jack. And then we have one more person on stack from the committee here, Adria. Adria, go ahead.
Hi, Jack. So since I've moved to Somerville 18 years ago, Somerville's had a really vibrant small business community. But more and more we see some of our businesses getting pushed out and as either large developers buy in or as chains come in. What do you see the role of city council in keeping our small business community as vibrant as it could be?
Yeah, I was recently asked this by the Magoon Square Twitter account, and I responded on Twitter. But I think most importantly is treating business locations and storefronts the same way that we do housing. We have to keep up affordable locations for people to be able to rent and own as city businesses. I think for small businesses in particular, something that I wrote about at length in my questionnaire to Union Square Main Streets in association with the Ball Square and Magoon Square Business Associations in their questionnaire was talking about the need for small businesses to have streamlined permitting. I know that a lot of our locations in Magoon Square have been really frustrated acquiring, buildings, not being able to move in, having lots of frustrations with lighting and signage and outdoor dining. And I think, frankly, for a lot of small business owners, they get caught up in the red tape sometime. And so I think in the same way that we would provide a list to tenants of their rights, we need to be providing small businesses lists as their rights as tenants in commercial spaces. But also on the retention front, we really need to make sure that we're keeping these small businesses. I'm incredibly concerned about the number of homes in the city that are being bought up by corporations and LLCs and turned into corporate leases. I'm scared in the same way about our commercial space. I really like the idea of mixed use businesses, especially Magoon and Ball Square, where we have an opportunity to put in affordable housing and keep business spaces that will benefit from increased traffic and increased transit users. I'm really focused on making sure that Magoon and Ball Square don't get left behind. It's a little bit harder here because obviously our planning work has to be done in conjunction with the city of Medford. I'm really focused on pushing our our economic planning department on making sure that we do that coordination with Medford.
That is time. Thanks so much, Jack. So with that, I'm going to open the stack now to other residents of Ward 5. We've got time for a couple more questions here. If there's anyone who lives in Ward 5 who's present but isn't a member of the committee, you can get on stack to ask a question of Jack now. And I see a couple of you already have. So I'll turn next to Sam Alterman. You have 30 seconds.
Thanks, Nate. So Jack, Tufts University, where you were a student, has been operating under an expired payment in lieu of taxes or pilot agreement with the city of Somerville since 2018, with negotiations stalled for years. Every year, the city collects more from parking fines than it does from one of the 50 wealthiest universities in the country. Additionally, Tufts doesn't house the majority of its undergraduate students, forcing low-income renters, including grad workers like me, who teach a large number of Tufts classes, to compete with the 10th wealthiest student body in the country for housing in West and Central Somerville. As the first Tufts undergrad to sit on the Somerville City Council, what would you do to make Tufts negotiate a fair pilot agreement and be a good neighbor to our city?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And also, hi. I don't think we've ever met, but I see you on Twitter at great frequency, and thank you for your civic involvement. So what I'll say is, obviously, although I wouldn't sit on the council as a Tufts undergraduate, one of the things that has stayed as an experience with me was, not being a home commuter student and seeing the environment that Tufts students were in competing for housing with local residents. One of the things that drives up our rent prices in this city by hundreds of dollars is the thousands of undergraduate and graduate students who are forced to compete in our housing market. That's not right. It's an obligation of Tufts University to build enough housing to build their student population. I would support local and state action in conjunction with Rep. Eiderhoven, who has a great pilot bill that's been proposed as well. We need to have regulation that requires them to build enough housing for their student body and not increase enrollment caps once they built that housing. Really, we're in a situation where it's detrimental to the city. Tufts is a great community partner. I know from having served on the Somerville Pollinator Advisory Committee that, especially with Dr. Dorian and the work that the Tufts Pollinator Institute has done, there's a lot of great outreach institutes at Tufts that do good work in the city. They're an essential city partner, but on the housing front, they have to build to make sure they have to take care of their workers. And we really want to see, Tufts continue to be the excellent community partner that they are. But part of that means fulfilling those commitments and making sure that competition for housing isn't driving up the cost in the city, especially, this is more of, West Somerville issue, but it's something that certainly affects us here because our housing network and our housing market is this wide. We have hundreds of dollars in extra costs that ordinary residents in Somerville pay because we haven't seen the construction to meet the needs of the student body. It's an unfortunate thing. It impacts a lot of residents here. And I think that rent burdening is something that Tufts University should be obligated to come and fulfill their commitment to.
Thanks so much, Jack. So next I'm going to go to Marcy. Marcy, you have 30 seconds.
Sure. Hi, Jack. So very often our city councilor, Abea, has been contacted by residents, by lower wage immigrant workers who are experiencing exploitation at the workplace in our very own city. Down the block from our house in Ball Square, the Soundbites employer was found by the U.S. Department of Labor to have stolen wages and retaliated, threatened his workers. Would you strengthen the current wage theft and living wage ordinances? And if so, how? What would you do to ensure that people can work in the city without abuse and exploitation?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an essential issue for us in the city. And we obviously have, a wage theft ordinance that goes above and beyond. Unfortunately, our enforcement of it has not been stellar, and we're still working on that. And it's actually one of the areas where I think Councilor Gomez-Moacad may continue to be involved. And so my pitch to her and to other Ward 5 residents is we have a wage theft committee. I'm hopeful that she'll join it as a citizen member. And I know it's something she's very passionate about and actually will probably very soon have an announcement about. But I think throughout the city, making sure that workers know about the protections that they have under law here. I was with Starbucks workers who are attempting to organize at the Elm Street location. I think it's, disgraceful, a lot of the things that we've seen specifically at that location with Starbucks, but of course throughout the city, tactics that really do amount to union busting, elections needing to be run and rerun in this city. I think it's really unfortunate, often on, technicalities that would shock and amaze even the most well-versed people in union law, of which we have several here. But I think, one of the things that we need to be doing is communicating those rights to people. The wage theft ordinance that I know Councilor Strezzo and Councilor Gomez-Moacad have both worked very hard on is one of its kind. Senator DiDomenico also has an excellent bill that I worked to help get endorsed at the state level by the Democratic Party that will help prevent wage theft, that will cover a lot of the problems that, and I believe that's 1069 or 1066 this session in the Senate. Making sure that we get something like that passed and get some state help on enabling action is essential for us, because unfortunately we've run into so many hurdles. That wage theft ordinance is several years out now, and we really have yet to see kind of the fruits from that come in the administration. I'm really hopeful that we get some state action there, but until we do, making sure that we work forward on the implementation of that ordinance is essential.
Thanks, Jack. All right, so we're running a little bit low on time, but I did want to sort of open the stack. If there's anyone else who's a Somerville resident who's present, who hasn't gotten a chance to ask a question, if you want to get on stack now, please feel free. Or anyone who has not asked a question yet. All right. Well, maybe I'm not seeing anyone else. Maybe I'll just sort of take the chair's privilege and ask the same question I asked Naima, which is, many current members of the city council were on record in support of charter reform that would give the council the ability to reallocate funds within the city budget. rather than just make cuts, which is what the body currently has the power to do. Despite this, 8 members of the current council voted against this change in the draft charter that they're currently working on with the mayor. I'm wondering, do you support the city council having the power to reallocate funds within the city budget? And if so, how would you effectuate that policy goal?
Nate, thank you. I appreciate that. And as you will probably know, because we were at many of them together, I attended every single one of the 24 Charter Review Committee meetings that Somerville held in the last 2 years here, with great attention to detail. Folks will know I'm a parliamentarian by trade. I engage in this stuff both for fun and for work, and making sure that we keep good sound governing rules for our city is important. Having been through all of those meetings, having talked with budget professionals from UMass and from the center that's helped us with that work there, I'm not convinced that reallocational powers for the council will help us in our overall goals. I think the mayor being able to craft a strong budget that comes in and fulfills the priorities that she's elected to fulfill is beneficial for us. I have seen in Boston, so Boston is the one municipality in the Commonwealth where they do have that reallocational power. It almost always ends in vetoes, override votes that are often very contentious and don't necessarily lead towards the implementation of uniform city policy. There's money and funds that are appropriated incorrectly as part of that process. It's something I'm open about. I know it's something that you very strongly support, and I've read a lot of the commentary. And obviously, we had 4 city councilors that did vote in support of that reallocation proposal. I'm interested in looking into ways that we can continue to work on this process, especially the new budget process, which I like better than the old process, but I don't love completely. I think especially I like the way that Chairman Wilson has gone through on the Finance Committee and changed that. I'd like to look more in detail at individual budget items on the council. I'm not convinced reallocation helps us in our overall goals. I'm not sure that the council has the expertise that a lot of the directors do in our city departments to make decisions about intricate parts of the budget. But again, I'm committed to listening to folks on this, but I'm not at this point convinced that it will be a policy that helps our council fulfill its objectives.
Appreciate that answer, Jack. Thanks so much. And then I guess last question of the night, we'll go back to Harris Grumman. Take it away, Harris. You have 30 seconds.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the union question came out. I'm glad you're supporting the Starbucks workers. That's very important. But I mean, you got to be aware, and I'm wondering how aware you are, that it's at the wealthy nonprofits like Tufts that we have the hardest time negotiating contracts, getting fair labor practices. And that's because they hide behind this, image of the institution does good work, which you certainly spoke strongly to. Are you ready to stand up and take that on, especially if you think, taking checks from unions is compromising or something like that? I don't know if what you meant by that, but we do represent working people who are, lower wage than the average Somerville resident and trying to stay here,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to clarify that bit from Nate's, he asked if I would reject money from any unions or PACs of anything like that. I've solicited money in endorsement questionnaires to unions. So no, I'm certainly not opposed to that. But as I was saying, in relation to the chairman's question, I don't want to be, if there's a group that would promote a kind of compromising interest, that would probably be a police union, would be what I was thinking would be what would promote a conflict of interest, but there might be something else that I just, in the spirit of Nate's question, was answering anything that would promote a conflict, I wouldn't accept. But no, certainly, I am prepared to stand up for workers at all of our institutions, especially those, that, I won't say hide behind, but those that have, a good reputation. Just because you do good work in the community elsewhere, it doesn't make you immune from treating your workers properly. That's an essential part of the commitment that they make to this community. And I'm strongly devoted to making sure that everyone, no matter how great the institution, I'm committed to it in our legislature. Where there's a strong unionization effort right now. I was a supporter and signer of the state staffers union in the state legislature. I'm a supporter of that, even though that is not something that is universally popular in the party. My campaign treasurer is heavily involved and presented at the city council for the Harvard Technical and Clerical Workers Union. Every one of my grandparents was a labor union member. My grandmother was a teachers union member. My partner was a longtime union organizer with educators. I've made sure that we stand up for people in this community and all over the world that are working, deserve to know all of the rights that there is and deserve to have those rights enforced. And I will absolutely stand up to any group in the country that bridges those rights.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jack, for that answer. And with that, I think our time has elapsed. So I do want to say thank you again to Jack for joining the Ward 5 committee for this Q&A. And good night. I'm gonna just stop the recording here.